Good afternoon. My name is Jeb Carlisle. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Salem Cyber. What a great day. Glad to be here in day two. Just awesome presentations, awesome energy from the other presenters. At Salem Cyber, it's our mission to empower cyber operators by identifying the most credible threats in their environment. You know, we are very focused on people. We work with a very people-first mentality. I loved hearing that earlier today from Philip. He was talking about that very human-centered approach. And with that, empowering defenders to win, make their lives better, and with that, enable the business and business partners to grow and innovate. We are very focused on human-centered innovation. So glad to be here, talk about practical AI driving SOC transformation. And let me turn it over to Trevor.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us. So just quick intros on who we are. There's a third member of our team, our leadership team, who's not here today. His name is John Bagg. He is actually the creator, co-founder of Salem Cyber. John, for quick background, is a cyber technologist, done this his whole career. So think analyst, engineer, architect, and really has lived and breathed a lot of the things we are talking about here today. So unfortunately, he couldn't be here. So then Jeb and I are here. A little quick background on myself. Trevor Gingras. I'm the CEO of Salem Cyber. Think of like a kind of a business background. I grew up in more of the financial risk and internal controls realm, and then went on to lead some other businesses, and got a really cool call a few years back from my good friends from undergrad, John Bagg, and he had an awesome idea, and we've been working hard to bring that to the market and solving a real problem that's been going on forever, but in a practical way that can actually do something now. And then third member of our team, Jeb Carlisle, who has been in the consulting world. So think, we heard earlier, people at the core of everything, and Jeb has lived that his entire career. We appreciate you having us here today. As mentioned, quick, we are in the realm for framing here of alert, triage, automation. So that's a lot of what we think about. That is what we care about. This is what we focus on. This is what we are fired up about, and what we do at Salem Cyber. Quick background, we were founded in 2021. We launched in fall of 2022. And so start thinking about like what has happened in that time and since that time. The attitudes towards AI have changed immensely. That doesn't mean, though, that AI has not been around. It's gone by many different phrases and words over time, but it's real and it's here. So today we want to focus on practical applications, but to frame for today, we want to give a little background on what has been happening since the beginning of automation.
Yeah, we kind of heard earlier a lot of definitions, a lot of things over time. Call it analytics, machine learning, AI. The term artificial intelligence was actually coined back in 1955 in the first AI program, also in the winter of that year. Was a lot of heavy, a lot of time was spent with DARPA, a lot of money there in the 60s. But since then, there's been several periods of what people call AI winters, right? Investment, energy, activity, but it hasn't always been consistent. One thing we can say, though, security automation has been on the table for over a decade now. It's been 5 years since Demisto was purchased by Palo, and opportunities still exist for accuracy and efficiency. Now, why are there so many alerts? Why are so few meaningful? As Trevor mentioned, Salem Cyber, founded in 2021, deployed to first client which is the Fortune 100 in the fall of 2022. And we are a human-led, machine-driven, AI-powered SOC innovation. Salem AI is designed to think like a cyber analyst. And then there comes the media overload, right? Think about November of 2022, ChatGPT launched by OpenAI, heavily credited with the current AI boom, and we see that today in the news. You've got many, Gemini, Claude, and the list goes on. Renewed excitement for focused on AI and investment in AI.
Awesome. So now we've got a little background here. Let's dial into practical applications and why we are here today. As you think about AI, you probably hear about it all the time. I don't know about you. The buzz from the buzzwords has really worn off, and ready to really think about like what is practical and how do we actually use it. And I'll start with just posing a rhetorical question. Why isn't there already an autonomous SOC? Why isn't it here? And I'll answer it in two ways. First, let's kind of forgive for a second the practical reasons why from an energy and cost standpoint, and really focus on the core of why. I'll tell a personal story real quick as to why this is in a non-security vein. So it was late December this past year. My wife and I woke up one day, and all of a sudden, all the money was gone from our bank account. And that was a big shock. We've got 2 young kids, we're entrepreneurs, and like, oh shit. And we started digging. And I'm personally not a cyber practitioner by trade, so I started seeing some things that are a little sketchy, and started getting on the phone, calling people I know and trust, and trying to figure this out. Well, as we started digging in, come to find out that it was the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut had withdrawn money from our account. Our bank approved it and let it happen, and we were never notified. So we woke up to a surprise. And as we started peeling back the layers of the onion, we come to find out that there was a relatively bona fide reason as to why it was, if you're a machine. And my wife had moved from Connecticut to Virginia a decade earlier. She had transferred everything, filed her taxes appropriately, blah, blah, blah. Well, there was a statement on her bank account that had interest for the year, so a 1099 INT, had gone to an old Connecticut address. Well, a machine that was looking for people who didn't file taxes in the state of Connecticut for given years, and they do a look back. Well, they look to see, hey, did this person file in the state of Connecticut? Yes or no? Do we have indications that they should have? Yes or no? If not, let's go look and say, ask the IRS, well, how much did they actually make that year? What should they have owed us? So then let's go out and reach out to them. Well, they didn't have a right address, so they probably reached out to us. They sent us a letter, but somewhere that we didn't live. There was no thought there, right? There was someone had built some applications at one point. Someone had coded something really well. It was good for that one inflexible use case, but at no point had they really designed some intervention. So we woke up one day with the impact of money's gone, panic, and not knowing what to do. So eventually we figured out what it was. We were able to go down the path of resolution and come to find out that they didn't have in their process any human intervention. So I started with a really high-level rhetorical question, gave you a personal story, come back to the point of the reason why autonomous SOC doesn't exist is human is required. You need human in the loop, you need human involved. It comes in different ways, but that is the key point of what we believe and why we are doing what we're doing. Let me talk real quick about SOC automation now. So before we talk about anything around just triage itself, I think we need to celebrate that there has been SOC automation happening already for decades, right? Jeb mentioned some of the pieces earlier. It is here and it is real. And we make sure that we celebrate and give credit to what actually has been done. My apologies. And I think that's really important to really recognize that. But not everything has been solved. And there's still so many pain points that we are here talking about today that still exist. I'd like to just hand it back to Jeb for a second to talk about some of the things that we are seeing at a very human level that are in the market that are affecting our point of view.
Yeah, I think Chris really hit the nail on the head earlier when he was describing the life of folks in security operations center and talking about the analyst being overwhelmed with the number of alerts. Security teams are covered up, looking at low fidelity alerts, high fidelity alerts, and really trying to identify what do we work on, what do we spend our time on. There are tools, solutions. We've talked about it, abundant. Some with integration, some lacking integration, and whether it's a new analyst or a seasoned analyst within an environment, they're still continuing to think about where do you go, what do you get where you need at that time you need it. So a lot of manual work, continued manual work to gather context, perform analysis, not to mention the continued vendors that are coming into the space, right? Multi-vendor, multi-source, multi-layered security solutions. So that just, from a human element standpoint, which was covered earlier, that adds pressure to perform, right? There's just a lot of, continued expectations on the performance level and continued pressure that's coming, pushed onto the SOC. So from that, there's still, the individuals there are still being managed on performance, measured on speed, consistency, and scale and coverage for the SOC.
Absolutely. And if you think about those words that Jeb just used, speed, coverage, consistency, and think about what that means for, like what comes to mind when you think about that? I think about machines. Those are three things that machines tend to be good at. So there's certainly a very good, opportunity for applications here. And I mentioned earlier, let's celebrate some of the real practical ones that are in play today. Some of the ones we've seen, I want to make sure that I've been learning and listening the last 24 hours I've been here and at an IR conference before this, and bringing some of those insights what we're seeing. We're here today at Lima Charlie's conference, and they're doing an incredible job. There are others here that are doing an incredible job that I probably don't even know about yet, and I'd love to learn and meet you. But some of the things we're seeing is that there's been a revolution in how data is collected. There's been a revolution in how data is enriched. Decisions have never been more informed. We're able to glean insights and take action in ways that we were never able to take before. And additionally, documentation has never been simpler. And yet, we still talk about a lot of different pain points here. So this success is great, and I think it's really important to then dive into why have we had this success, and then what can we have next, given those different sets of criteria. So I would like to dive into what does practical mean, how do you actually practically apply AI. So to me, practically means first being purpose-built for very specific pain. Can't be a generalist, can't be applied to like let's take ChatGPT and just spread it on this without any kind of specific knowledge. I think here today, everyone here largely in this room is a cyber practitioner, building products for cyber practitioners or our cyber practitioners themselves. Products that are purpose-built for a specific pain by people who know that pain. That's really important. In our example, John has been a career architect, engineer, and analyst, has lived the pain of triage and designed a new product and a new way to go about that based on his experiences. I think that's super important. Also, think about where are things actually applied. They're applied into workflows. Those workflows exist today with automation. They also, more importantly, exist with people. And those people are the ones that in there making the decisions. They're making the actions. They're the ones deciding what happens and when. So designing for those human workflows. And then finally, is something that actually can be operationalized. It's great to have ideas. It's great to have these different things, but there's a lot of stage gates to actually bring something to market. And the biggest one we see for these stage gates is what does cyber maturity look like for an organization? There isn't just one we stand up here today talking about Salem a bit, and not every organization has the same need that we talk to in the market. Like when we go talk to them, they've got very different needs based on the realities that they have. That really varies between at the top end. You hear like Philip talking earlier about some of the pains that they have at Coinbase, but how they've done so well. Yet on the other end of the spectrum, you've got small organizations or others who don't even have EDR applied to all their endpoints. Apparently, that's also a big company problem too. We were hearing earlier, but you can't just go apply something where it can't be applied. It's a hammer looking for a nail type of situation. So to us, practical means these three things. So as we look at the alert triage process, this is the application that we focus on the most. I'd like to just dive into what that process is and where we see automation happening now and automation happening next. So those familiar, simple process, you always hear the D and the R, so detection response. To me, there's always been a word missing in the middle, and that's where a lot of time and pain actually ends up being. Jeb talked about the human pain earlier around SOC analysts, but there's analysis, there's triage, there's investigations. There's a lot of work that happens in this workflow that's generally kind of washed over when you hear tools that are just DR. And it's really interesting to unpack what that workflow is and why people are successful at doing that workflow today before you can apply any kind of technology on top of it. As we've uncovered and thought through what that workflow really looks like, we've dialed into how is someone successful at walking through one alert. They come with this industry knowledge they've been trained on over the years. They work at an organization. They've got specific knowledge around the actual alert that they're seeing, and now they're reading something that has happened. Detection has happened, and this activity that was in there, for whatever reason by this rule, was deemed to have been potentially malicious. It's suspicious right now. It could be, but we don't know yet. And the detection tools, I'm not trying to say they're doing a bad job there, but it's hard to just go look for, hey, I want to look for this bad thing. You end up looking for proxy activity for a bad thing. And so then you have to create an alert for that when you see that thing and someone needs to look at it. Great. Now step 2, analysis. Someone starts looking at it, they walk through the path of all the potential if-thens as they learn through step 1, what is the alert, what is the activity, what's the type of account, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As they learn and as they apply their knowledge and as they are curious, they take those and then they start refining in their mind a decision. This all happens real time. Obviously, we're all humans, we know this. And as that decision comes to bear, they eventually get to the result of let's act, let's not act. And why are they so successful at doing that on an individual basis is because those things I mentioned earlier about having the knowledge, not only of what are the TTPs, and we know exactly like what people are doing, we're seeing it now here live, but then also being able to apply like, well, what does this mean in the context of my organization or context of the specific event? And as you unpack that then, what happens is you're trying to be able to apply your knowledge that you've learned over time to making this decision. So then the core of this becomes then that knowledge that's in the middle to be able to make a decision. And how can you actually unpack that decision, that knowledge to be able to potentially scale it with AI? We focus specifically on that segment of the problem, is the ability to learn and apply those learnings to activity over time and refine then from time to time as you proceed. We heard earlier a really good analogy about Mike Tyson and the quote that was given there. It's actually funny. I was sitting in bed last night thinking of a very similar thing of, there's seemingly a fight that happens, and then the moment the fight ends, there's another fight. And other analogies from the sports world I think are very accessible in bringing here is how do you actually apply what you learn from fight number 1 to fight number 2? What do you do in between? What happens that learning from there? Is it documented? Is it put anywhere? That right there is the source of what is the ability to actually apply AI going forward, is being able to take that knowledge and specifically learn from somewhere, put it into a machine that is able to understand and is built by people who understand the same thing, and then take that and scale it. As we move forward here, we see a few things. One, we see decision-making at scale. So if you think about this a second ago, I mentioned that knowledge is very important. To be able to make decisions at scale, you have to have trust. You have to have trust that something was built for what you're trying to decide on. And you need to have auditability. That we see AI being practically applied into decision-making. It sounds scary. And there's obviously a lot of controls to be put in place around this, and that is what is happening today. But how it's applied and where it's applied is where we come back to the human element from before. We see this being really important that machines are able to be applied at scale to attack things like triage, so that they actually can go look and take the knowledge of someone and scale up their knowledge and make the impact of those people's knowledge and apply it to the problem at hand. The next piece we then see being really relevant is, had a conversation with a few individuals last night around workflows they have, and what really stuck out for me was communication and collaboration, and the ability to interact with, once you actually know something, what do you do and who do you with? Very rarely can you act in a silo. Going back to my example from earlier, like I was impacted by something, and I had to go do an intervention myself. Well, in that sense, I'm almost like the business. Security is part of a business, and it serves to support the business. And there are many different examples of what that business means and what that means on a very individual use case level. For example, DLP with insiders and what's the actual risk at hand. But in the end, to be able to actually be effective, you have to be able to collaborate. So we see the tools of now that are coming to market and that are in market, be able to first make decisions, and then second, be able to collaborate with what are the impact of those decisions. And then finally, the ability to learn. So much has been spoken about playbooks. Playbooks are very incredibly impactful. We see them as being less and less inflexible over time, so that they become more flexible and more dynamic. It's really impactful, but how do you take the learnings from some of the things that you saw and be able to deploy them back into those playbooks? We see that as the place that's happening right now. Probably the most aggressive changes are happening today, which is honestly really exciting, because that then unlocks the ability to bring back decision-making collaboration. So in conclusion, we just want to wrap up with 4 points real quick. The impact of which those things I mentioned a second ago around decision-making, collaboration, and learning, we see being fourfold. First, speed. Speed is so important. Doesn't have to be fast on everything, but you have to be fast on things that actually matter. And if you can make the right decisions, if you can collaborate with others, and if you can learn from what you've done in the past and apply it to the future, you're able to then act with speed. Scale matters. All I hear from all the anecdotes today and the days prior is that we are not meeting the demands of what's coming at us, and that it comes in many flavors. But when you are being fought with a machine and people, you need to have, obviously, similar capabilities on the other side. So scale is certainly impactful, and then consistency. The 3 a.m. comment from earlier hits home so much. We see so often, like, when are you going to attack someone who's vulnerable? When they're most vulnerable, right? It happens on, people's daily lives. We see, tons of examples on nights, weekends, holidays to state kind of some of the obvious things, but people know when defenses are weakest, and that's when they're going to act the soonest. So you need to be consistent, and AI that is able to provide that scale and speed is able to do so also with consistency, and then bring people back into the loop. And then finally is the impact to people's lives. As we've seen the transformation happening in the SOC from in the last few years, kind of regardless of maturity, the impact of daily lives of people has been incredible. Jeb mentioned earlier that there is just so much still to do. There was a comment made earlier about the average analyst is in the role for 9 months. But how do we actually address that? Our point of view is strongly is that is enabled and as a benefit of the machines being there to help, not to replace by any means of the imagination, but there to help and support and actually bring their knowledge and apply it to the problem at hand. I've talked enough. Thank you for listening. And are there any questions so far? In the back.
That was great, guys. Just a quick question around what would your advice be for showing the efficacy of this AI alongside a human? Like, something that comes to my mind is we could either back test like a year's worth that a human alert did, right? Compare the results. We could do kind of like a drive along, right, with the AI for a week, compare the results. But in either case, what we see is just whether it triages something as malicious or benign. So I would just be curious about that. Might not be enough to show someone, like with the human, we want to see like a junior analyst. How did you come to that conclusion, right? So I don't know your thoughts on that, but.
Probably have a few thoughts. I'll try to keep it really short, and then I'll pause for Jeb if you want to add anything. But first, I think first element is you have to be extremely transparent. I would take a clear box mentality. You can't have a black box. It has to be able to show its work. And so that's first and foremost what it's able to do. Second is then how do you actually demonstrate? I think it's the question we get every time, all the time. And there are many ways to actually show that and improve that. But it really depends on the customer objective, I would say, at hand. So you mentioned like back testing. Certainly, hey, go take the last X number of alerts and then run it through and see how it does. Go look through those results and see what you like and what you don't like. How does it perform versus expectations? Similarly, you can take like a red team and actually test in real time. You also can do different things from a net new standpoint. Like, what if I want to create a new detection rule? How do I actually operationalize that if I've got a team already in place today and I'm worried about tipping over the apple cart? I want to be able to give them the ability to actually go look at the results of this new detection I'm building, but how do I do that? To us, that's a way you can test in real time, like your ideas. You're able to actually do that in a bit of like a kind of a lab environment and see that firsthand, and actually then be able to take the clear box mentality and then refine from what you see and learn and glean. The final comment I'll make real quick is you mentioned like a dual state. I think we actually think in a tri-state. So if you're a junior analyst, what are you going to do? You're either going to mark something as a false positive. You are going to escalate something that you deem to be really worthy of someone's time that's likely to be a threat and get in front of them immediately. And then there's this other bucket. And this other bucket is things that are interesting, that maybe you don't have enough information on. Maybe it's net new. Maybe it's something you never know. That's a reality of someone being in a job, no matter how long they've been in the job. There's always something that's different and new. Maybe you don't know enough. But how do you go find that? How do you go learn more about that? And the path to doing so, I think, is really important. You could go talk to someone else in the organization. Go back to the collaboration point. You could go look at and find different sources of information. I mean, again, we're back here at Levis Charlie's conference, and there's a lot of information out there that is already connected in. What do you go look at next to be able to learn and answer the questions of why you didn't get to a conviction on the first time? Thank you. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you for the time. Matt, back to you.
Awesome.